Our last type of structural classification was known as synovial joints. So synovial joints are going to be filled, it's a cavity that's filled with actually synovial fluid, and it has synovial membranes with it. This is the only type that's diarthrosis. Remember, diarthrosis means lots of movement. And there are 6 types of synovial joints, and we're going to look at each of those types. So here down below, we're going to write the 6 types, and then we're going to go to another worksheet that has each type that you're going to be filling in. Here's a picture of a synovial joint. So basically you have 2 long bones coming together, and it has this cavity. You have a ligament there, but in here is that synovial fluid. We do have that hyaline articular cartilage at the end there. So this is what a synovial joint looks like, and there are 6 types of synovial joints. So let's look at those. And then we'll look at them more specifically. So there is going to be the plane joint, a hinge joint, a pivot joint, a condyloid or ellipsoid. Those both words are acceptable. Saddle joint, and then everyone probably is most familiar with the ball and socket. So there are 6 types of synovial joints, and you should have a separate handout that you're going to be filling in as we talk about the 6 different types of synovial joints. And on your test, there's a part where you're going to be matching the example to the type of synovial joint. So there's a big matching session with these 6. So please write the examples down as we go over them. So let's start with the plane and the hinge joint. So your handout should look something like this, and you're going to be matching the type of synovial joint to an example. Okay, so our first one is plane joint, and during plane joint you just get this gliding past one another. Kind of think of the Queen's wave, that back and forth. So we're going to see this between your bones of your carpals, just that sliding back and forth, and between your tarsals. So those bones just kind of slide past one another, kind of give us a uniaxial direction there. And then your hinge joint, think about a hinge on a door. We're going to get more of an angle movement with this, and so your knee and your elbow are hinge joints, and so they only go in one direction there. We also see that between your phalanges there, for instance, your fingers, there might be 3 bones in there, so you can bend them one direction. They should only bend one direction, and those are hinge joints that you have. So you can always pause the video if you need to. So this is just showing, so we're looking at some tarsals here, and so here's some carpals here. They just slide past one another, and so that is that plane joint or gliding. And then your elbow is a hinge, and so you should be looking at that ulna and humerus, how they join together, and also between your phalanges we've got this hinge. Plane joint just slides back and forth. Hinge joint is going to move kind of like a hinge on a door. So our next 2 are the pivot joint, and so this is where we're going to get some rotation going on. It's how we rotate our wrists, etc. And so we see a pivot joint pivoting between the ulna and the radius, which is what we're seeing here. And then your C1 and your C2 vertebra, we see a pivot there. That's how you can do that. Yes, that no, as you shake your head no, we're going to see that rotation off of that odontoid process or DENS, whichever way you learned it in lab. So that's the pivot joint. So the condyloid joint, also known as the ellipsoid joint, allows a side-to-side, a back and forth, and then a rotation. So if you have your hand, you can take and rotate it around the wrist, and so your wrist is an example. You're also going to see it between your knuckle, which is your metacarpal, and your phalanges. You're going to see this condyloid joint. And so you can see that this one here is that pivot joint, and we get that rotation. And between your C1 and C2, that's the pivot. It's kind of like a mortar and pestle that you crush up and can crush up like tablets and things with in chemistry. We use that. So that's kind of what so it allows this rotation. So you're going to see it in your carpals here as it's coming in contact with that radius in the ulna. And so that is the condyloid that we're seeing here. We also see it, this is your metacarpal here, and this is one of your phalanges. I know it looks like a phalange, but it's not. So you've got that. So we're also seeing it there, kind of like a bowl looking thing, the way it allows it to rotate. So this is the condyloid, and so here's a pivot allowing it to turn, and then the condyloid allowing it to rotate within this little bowl looking thing. And our last two are the saddle joint. And the saddle joint allows it to go back and forth. It cannot rotate along the axis, which is why this one's different than a condyloid. And if I get a chance, I'll bring the hand model in and show you. But this is specifically between the carpal and the metacarpal of the thumb. And it's while we are able to have opposable fingers because of the way it rotates. So it kind of looks like it sits in a saddle. So specifically between the carpal metacarpal of the thumb, and it allows it to saddle in there. And then the most common one is that ball and socket, and we're going to get lots of movement there, that diarthrosis, lots of movement with this. Of course, all these are diarthrosis, but this is going to be free rotation of the hip and the shoulder because one has a head and it fits into the socket of the other, and your hip and shoulder are examples of the ball and socket. So all 6 of these, again, would be matching on your test. You're matching the example to the type of synovial joint. It's called a synovial joint because it has that synovial fluid that is in that little space in between the two bones, and so the bones aren't directly touching.